In the 1920s in New Jersey and Illinois, the factories glowed at night. Not from the lights inside, from the workers themselves. The women who painted radium dials in these buildings sometimes walked home in the dark with their hair and clothing faintly luminous, green-white, ghostly, beautiful. They called it the Undark. They did not know it was killing them. These women were the best-paid factory workers in America. At a time when most working women earned poverty wages, the Radium Girls, as they would come to be called, earned more than many men. They were proud of their work, they were good at it, and they were being slowly poisoned by the very thing that made their work so valuable. They were taught to do it this way.
Now, point the brush with your lips. Just like that, to keep the tip fine. That's it, you'll be fast in no time.
The brush into the radium paint. Put the brush between the lips to form a fine point. Paint the dial. Repeat. Dip. Lip. Paint. Dip. Lip. Paint. Hundreds of times a day. The supervisors told them the paint was harmless. Some said it would put roses in their cheeks. The company knew otherwise. Radium was discovered in 1898 by Marie and Pierre Curie in a cold shed in Paris. It was extraordinary, a substance that emitted energy continuously, without any external source, in defiance of everything physics then understood. Marie Curie called it radioactivity. She did not know it would eventually kill her. Nobody did. Radiation was invisible. Its effects took years to appear. And in the early 20th century, it was not feared, it was celebrated. Radium became a craze. Companies put it in everything: toothpaste, face cream, water crocs, chocolate. Doctors prescribed radium water as a health tonic. Spas advertised radium baths. It was the miracle element of the modern age, the gift of science to humanity. The United States Radium Corporation understood this perfectly. They told their workers that radium was not only safe, it was good for them. By 1917, the United States Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey was painting for million dials a year. In Illinois, the Radium Dial Company employed hundreds more. The paint they used, Undark, they branded it, contained radium-226, one of the most dangerous isotopes ever identified. The women who applied it were given no protective equipment. No gloves, no masks, no ventilation beyond ordinary windows. They painted it onto their nails for fun. They painted their teeth to make them glow at parties. The company watched and said nothing. Here is what radium does when it enters the human body. Because radium is chemically similar to calcium, the body mistakes it for bone material and deposits it directly into the skeleton. Once inside the bone, it irradiates the surrounding tissue continuously, not for days, not for years, but for the rest of a person's life, because radium-226 has a half-life of 1,600 years. It destroys bone from the inside. It causes the bone to soften, crumble, and eventually collapse. And because the women were putting the brush to their lips hundreds of times a day, the first place the radium concentrated was the jaw. The first symptom was toothache, then loose teeth. Then the teeth began to fall out on their own, leaving wounds that would not heal. The dentists who examined the Radium Girls were baffled. The wounds in the jaw did not close. The bone around the extraction sites crumbled when touched. In some cases, the jawbone itself could be removed by hand. It had been so completely destroyed by internal irradiation that it had lost all structural integrity. The women were told they had infections, anemia, syphilis, any explanation except the true one. Grace Fryer had worked at the Orange, New Jersey factory since she was 18 years old. She was one of the most skilled painters on the floor. By 1922, she was 22, her teeth were gone, and her jaw was collapsing. She went to doctor after doctor. Each one gave her a different diagnosis. Each one was wrong. It took Grace Fryer for years of worsening pain and deterioration, to find a doctor willing to consider that her workplace might be the cause. The United States Radium Corporation hired their own doctors to examine sick workers. Those doctors consistently found nothing wrong. The company was aware by at least 1924, from their own internal studies, that radium was accumulating in their workers' bones. They did not tell the workers. They did not change the lip-pointing technique. They continued production. And when workers began dying, The company paid for their funerals and attributed the deaths to other causes. Decades later, when the company's internal records were finally unsealed, they revealed what the executives had known and hidden. The company had commissioned studies as early as 1923. The studies showed dangerous radium levels in workers' bodies. The executives read the reports. They held meetings. They decided that disclosure would damage the company's reputation and expose them to liability. The women continued to paint. In 1927, 5 of the surviving Radium Girls, Craze Fryer, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Albina Loris, and Quinta McDonald hired a lawyer named Raymond Berry. They intended to sue the United States Radium Corporation. The company was not concerned. New Jersey's statute of limitations on personal injury was 2 years. The women had been sick for much longer. Every lawyer they had approached before Berry had turned them away for this reason. Berry took the case anyway. By the time the case came to court, the women were too ill to walk without assistance. Grace Fryer wore a back brace that prevented her from raising her arm. Catherine Schaub had lost most of her jaw. Quinta McDonald could barely leave her bed on bad days. The company's legal team moved to have the case dismissed on statute of limitations grounds. They nearly succeeded. The judge allowed it to proceed by a single legal argument that the women could not have known what causing their illness until a doctor confirmed the radium connection. The clock had only started then. The trial drew enormous public attention. Newspapers across the country covered it. The women became symbols not of victimhood, though they were victims, but of something harder to define. Of the decision to be believed. Of the refusal to disappear quietly. The company's defense was that the women's illness had other causes, that their own lifestyle or medical histories were responsible, that radium at the levels they were exposed to was not harmful. The women's medical records, their X-rays, the evidence of their own bodies told a different story. The press coverage changed everything. The United States Radium Corporation had counted on the women dying quietly, without public attention. Instead, their case was on the front page of every major paper in America. The public outcry was immediate. And the company, suddenly aware that a jury of ordinary Americans had been reading these stories every day, decided to negotiate. In 1928, the United States Radium Corporation settled with the 5 plaintiffs out of court. Each woman received $10,000, approximately $160,000 in today's money. They received a weekly stipend for life. And they received full payment of all medical bills. It was a legal victory. It was also a tragedy. Catherine Schaub would be dead within 2 years. Grace Fryer within 4. Quinta McDonald, Edna Hussman, and Albina Laura survived longer but lived the rest of their lives in chronic pain. The $10,000 could not restore what had been taken. While the New Jersey case was being settled, in Ottawa, Illinois, the Radium Dial Company continued operations without changing a single practice. The women there had heard about the New Jersey case. They had asked their supervisors if they were safe. They were told yes. They were told the New Jersey situation was different. They were told to continue working. They continued working. And they began to get sick in exactly the same way. Catherine Wolfe Donahue had worked at the Radium Dial Company since 1922. By 1934 she could not lift her arm above her head. Her hip had fractured spontaneously, the bone so irradiated it could no longer support her weight. Her jaw was deteriorating. She filed suit against the Radium Dial Company in 1936 alongside 4 other women. The company's defense was the same playbook as New Jersey 8 years earlier. Deny, delay, attribute the illness to other causes, run out the clock. Catherine Donahue gave her testimony from a stretcher because she could not leave her bed under other circumstances. The commissioners brought the hearing to her home when she could no longer travel. She testified clearly. She described the work she had done, the instructions she had been given, the years of illness that followed. She died in July 1938, at 35 years old, 5 weeks before the commission issued its final ruling in her favor. The company was ordered to pay compensation. Catherine did not live to receive it. The contamination did not end with the women. The factories where the Radium Girls worked scattered radioactive dust throughout their buildings, their neighborhoods, and the soil beneath. In Ottawa, Illinois, homes and businesses built on or near the former Radium Dial Company site have tested positive for radium contamination for decades. The EPA has been involved in cleanup operations in the area since the 1980s. The houses glow on radiation surveys. The soil carries the half-life. Radium-226 has 1,600 years to go before it is half as dangerous as it is now. The women are gone. The poison remains. The legal cases of the Radium Girls established precedents that shaped occupational safety law in the United States for generations. Their cases were among the first in which a corporation was held liable for knowingly exposing workers to a hazardous substance. The principle that employers have a duty of care to their workers that they cannot knowingly conceal health hazards was substantially strengthened by what these women fought for and what they lost. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, founded in 1970, is in part a legacy of Grace Fryer and Cather and Donahue sitting across from company doctors who told them they were fine. The legal cases of the Radium Girls established precedents that shaped occupational safety law in the United States for generations. Their cases were among the first in which a corporation was held liable for knowingly exposing workers to a hazardous substance. The principle that employers have a duty of care to their workers that they cannot knowingly conceal health hazards was substantially strengthened by what these women fought for and what they lost. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, founded in 1970, is in part a legacy of Grace Fryer and Cather and Donahue sitting across from company doctors who told them they were fine. The watches they made are still in existence. Some are in collections. Some are in drawers in old houses where people do not know what they have. They still glow in the dark faintly, after a century, but measurably. A watch painter named May Cubberley died at 24. A painter named Marguerite Glasinski at 22. Irene Laporte at 26. Helen Munch at 24. Inez Volat at 27. They made beautiful things. The things outlasted them by a century, and will outlast them by another. What do you mourn for people you never met? You mourn what they would have been. Grace Fryer would have been 30 when the Second World War began. Catherine Donahue's children grew up without a mother. The women who died at 22 had barely started. The company that killed them continued operating under different names for years. Some executives lived to old age. The statute of limitations. The corporate structure. The legal costs of fighting all of it was designed, whether intentionally or not, to make it as difficult as possible for the people with the least power to hold the people with the most power accountable. What do you mourn for people you never met? You mourn what they would have been. Grace Fryer would have been 30 when the Second World War began. Catherine Donahue's children grew up without a mother. The women who died at 22 had barely started. The company that killed them continued operating under different names for years. Some executives lived to old age. The statute of limitations. The corporate structure. The legal costs of fighting all of it was designed, whether intentionally or not, to make it as difficult as possible for the people with the least power to hold the people with the most power accountable.